Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. And tonight we're going to be talking about magic again. But we're going to be talking about a specific, very powerful type of magic, which you might have heard of. It's known as Enochian Magick. What is Enochian Magick? Well, Enochian Magick is a discrete system of magic in its own right, with its own tools, its own invocations, its own system of tables, and even its own magical language. And it even has its own cosmology. And the purpose of Enochian Magick is to contact and communicate with the angelic realm at its various levels, to contact angelic beings and to ask them for information, sometimes to ask them for other things as well. But Enochian Magick today has become most commonly used as a way of trying to obtain higher knowledge, and indeed that does seem to be what the purpose behind the reception of this form of magic really was. Purportedly it was the angels themselves who gave this form of magic through divine revelation of sorts to a couple of Elizabethan magicians. So what is the origin of Enochian Magick? Well, it dates back to the Elizabethan times, that is the reign of Elizabeth I in the 1500s in England. Queen Elizabeth I had a lot of very colourful interests, and she actually had as one of her main advisors a man by the name of John Dee, who was considered her court astrologer. Now, John Dee is what you would call a Renaissance man. He was very learned in a number of different areas, from navigation to the Hermetic arts, science, all the way through to magic. And he was also a cryptographer and a spy in the service of the Queen, and he used as his code name 007, which is where we get 007 from. When Ian Fleming was writing the James Bond novels, he took that moniker of John Dee's and applied it to his own fictional character. But Dee was involved in all kinds of intrigues, and he's credited with coming up with the concept of the British Empire, for better or for worse. As I said, Dee was very interested in Hermeticism and magic. He wrote a text called the Mons Hieroglyphica, where he tried to reconcile the symbols of the 7 planets into a single symbol, and he was also very interested in a medieval grimoire known as the Book of Soiga, and just very interested in grimoires in general. He seems to have been quite influenced by Cornelius Agrippa, particularly his techniques for contacting spirits as per Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. But Dee was also a very devout man. He was a very Christian man. He believed in trying to serve the will of God, trying to bring the kingdom of God on earth into being. And one of the operations that John Dee set out upon in his life was to try and communicate with angels, to try and get information from angelic beings. Being a very devout Christian man, Dee was influenced by his faith in his magical practice and wanted to go straight to the source and discover the secrets of the universe by communing with God's messengers directly. So Dee made lots of attempts to contact the angels using methods common to medieval magicians. As I've already mentioned, particularly Agrippa. He didn't get very far, and so he began to employ the services of a number of scryers. Now, if you don't know what scrying is, basically it's a form of divination where you get a seeing stone, most often a crystal ball, and you try and use the stone in some way in order to receive messages from the spirit realm. And so Dee wanted to receive his information from the angels in this way, but he was not very good at scrying himself, so he employed a number of scryers. He didn't get very far at first, and then he employed a man by the name of Edward Kelley, who among other things, claimed to be an alchemist who at one point manufactured the red tincture. That was a claim that he made at one point in his career. But he was also widely considered a scoundrel. But in spite of all that, apparently, he had some natural scrying abilities. So John Dee employed the services of this Edward Kelley, and immediately during their experiments trying to contact the angels, with Dee and Kelley together, they started to get messages from the angels that Dee was calling up. At this stage, it appears that Dee's method was basically to just pray to God, and then sit in silence and get Kelley to use the scrying crystal. So not quite as ceremonial as other forms of magical evocation of the period. But they received angelic communications, according to Dee's diaries from the time. And Dee is also said to have recited many psalms prior to his angelic experiments in order to protect himself spiritually. So a lot of things began to happen, a lot of unusual things began to happen during the operations conducted by Dee and Kelley. They claimed to have made contact with the angel Uriel, and they claimed that Uriel manifested a gemstone where they were doing their workings. And thereafter, Kelley would use that gemstone as his scrying crystal. So Edward Kelley used this scrying crystal for more scrying sessions during this operation, received more communications, which John Dee then transcribed as the scribe of these operations. Although purportedly the angels that were speaking through Kelley didn't like him very much, they impugned his moral character, which is pretty funny, but they communicated through him nonetheless. So the angels began communicating more information began flowing through in these scrying sessions, and the angels gave Dee and Kelley instructions for setting up temple furniture and creating magical tools that they could then use to better contact the angels. It's important to note here that the tools weren't necessary to communicate with the angels, but they did enhance the power of the operation that they were engaging in, and they did offer a certain buffer between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. So the first thing the angels did was describe how to build the ritual space up for the subsequent communications that they would give. They described a holy table, which was 3 by 3, upon which would be a sigil, a wax seal, with various angelic names and names of God on it, which would be placed, well, one large seal would be placed on top of the holy table and 4 small ones under the 4 legs of the table. And then around the seal would be 7 talismans, one for each planet, which were known as the ensigns of creation, which the angels communicated the design of. You had the scrying crystal, and that scrying crystal would sit on top of the wax seal that I described before, which is called the sigillum de emeth. This is what the wax seal, the sigillum de emeth, looks like. That was used by Edward Kelley in the scrying rituals. This is a replica. I got it on Etsy quite a few years ago in preparation for my own Enochian workings. On the back it's got Ugla. So that's what you're working with when you're working with the wax seals. And there's other symbols as well that you work with as magical tools. There was a red carpet that was supposed to go under the legs of the table, presumably under the 4 wax seals holding up the legs, a white linen cloth over the top of the holy table, and then another cloth on top of that in red and green colours, which I've interpreted as like a taffeta of red and green. And the angels also described 12 banners representing the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 zodiacal signs to surround the space that Dee and Kelley were working in. And they described a number of additional tools, most notably the Ring of Solomon, as they called it, a golden ring which was to be worn on the finger. And they also described a holy layman to be worn over the breast. In addition to this, there were a number of tables that the angels described to Dee and Kelley to be used in various different operations. So there was the Tabula Bonorum, which is a table with names of the 7 planetary angels and the 6 angels under each of them, for a total of 49 planetary angels, to be used in the planetary workings of the Heptarchia system, part of the broader system of Enochian Magick. There was also the Great Table of the Watchtowers, which represented the 4 corners of the earth and the 4 elements, which contained various other angelic names to summon forth angels residing in different parts of the earth or the airs surrounding the earth. There was also the tables of the Book of Loagaeth, or Speech from God, and these tables were supposed to be a restoration of the lost Book of Enoch, which is a legendary book, not to be confused with the apocryphal Book of Enoch that we know today, but it was a legendary book like the Book of Thoth, which the angels are said to have dictated to Enoch, the prophet in the Old Testament. And now Dee and Kelley claim to have received that same knowledge in the angelic language of Enochian in the form of these 49 tables of Loagaeth. And they also received the mysterious table of Nalvagay. The other thing as well, of course, is that the angels communicated a new language to Dee and Kelley, which today is known as the Enochian Language. This was meant to be the language of the angels. It was meant to be the primordial language spoken by Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, taught to them directly by the angels. It was a magical language, a language of power. It was the language in which they named all of the things of the earth and thus conveyed their power over them. And it was supposed to be the ancient language that's now lost, which Hebrew is derived from. That is the mythology behind Enochian, whether you believe it or not. Many people consider it to be a made-up language like Klingon, although it does have its own internal grammar and syntax. There are 21 distinct Enochian letters, and in addition to this, there are a number of words that are Enochian words that were given to Dee and Kelley, which have English translations. Although the Enochian lexicon of words is by no means complete, we don't have words for everything that's in the dictionary, but there are certain words which we know in Enochian which have an English translation. And in some circumstances, the communications that the angels gave to Dee and Kelley in Enochian were communicated from right to left, in a safeguard from the full potency of those words being spoken having unintended consequences. So we have Dee and Kelley getting together, engaging in this magical operation to communicate with the angels. They claim to be successful. Kelley claims to be scrying the information using a seeing stone. Dee is dutifully transcribing everything, and what the angels are giving them is a language, and they're also giving them the tools of the operation, how to furnish the room, which can be used to unlock various names and various bits of knowledge. So everything is in place for the magical system to be used as the angels intended it to be used by Dee and Kelley. But unfortunately, these two magicians didn't get very far in actually applying the knowledge that they had received. So onerous was the task of actually receiving all the information, downloading all the information in the first place. But what they were able to receive is what each part of the system that they had received was meant to be used for. But the other famous bit of information that comes from the Enochian system that Dee and Kelley received is the 48 calls. There were these 49 tables of Lower Gaiath, and they were just Enochian script which had no translation, and the calls were given to Dee and Kelley, and these calls were given not only to contact certain angels, but to unlock the knowledge in each of these tables of Lower Gaiath. Now you've probably noticed that there's 48 calls and only 49 tablets. Now there's a bit of a mystery in that, which I'll explain in a subsequent video. But for the time being, there are these 48 calls. But just to confuse matters even more, there's actually only 19. Because the first 18 calls were given in the Enochian language to Dee and Kelley by the angels, and then the 19th was actually 30 in one. It was one call, one invocation, but you substitute one word in the invocation, which is the name of one of the 30 ethers. And depending on which ether you can use this 19th call to open one of the 30 ethers. What are the ethers? The ethers are kind of like successive layers of heaven. You can think of them like, if you're familiar with other forms of medieval magic, it's like the concentric layers of the heavenly spheres of the planets. And so these were the different levels of heaven, the different ethers that were being opened by the 19th call, depending on what name of the ether you used. But again, there's no indication that Dee and Kelley themselves ever used the calls for anything. Eventually, the relationship between Dee and Kelley broke down. They parted ways after that, and they left behind this system of Enochian magic that had not yet been fully used, only received. And the information we have about the Enochian system today really comes from two sources, which were publications of various journals of John Dee. One of these publications is often just shortened to A True and Faithful Relation. And then the other source for the Enochian system is the 5 Books of Mystery. Again, this is Dee's journals from a particular period. But there was a lot more information that was recorded in these sessions that has been lost because it's simply been lost to time, or it's been destroyed by accident, or who knows, maybe deliberately or by providence or by the intervention of demonic spirits, who knows. Okay, so that is a huge information dump. That is a lot of information, and we're only just getting started.